Hey guys, this is Cat3 with Tape, and today you join me for episode 8 of Kerbal Rising. Yes, we are finally back, with me back from Belfast. We are back to Kerbal Rising, and today we pick up where we left off, around Butte. Well, actually we left off there a while ago, but I left my carrier there because you may remember last episode, I know it's a while ago, we failed to take Butte because it was too well defended and our bomber was shot down. So we're sending another one from the UFN Hercules still sitting in orbit around Butte. And this will require, of course, a very precise operation. Nothing can go wrong. We must take this with the utmost seriousness and not lose control of the plane on God damn it, I lost control of the plane on re-entry. Anyway, yeah, luckily the metamaterials we're using these days are pretty tough, so it doesn't matter that for some reason this bomber just always flips out on re-entry, and we can indeed carry on with the mission. So yeah, actually this is a pretty easy one. Last time, the missile battery that's still down there fired all of its missiles, and we did destroy the frigate that was defending it, but we did lose the bomber before we could fully finish off the forces down there. So we had to wait to this turn to take the base. So we're just flying in, lining up a little guidance pod. You can see the little missile battery down there. It's just in there. So we've locked on, and now we're going to fire probably just a couple of missiles. This doesn't have any weaponry or armor, so we're just going to fire 2 to be safe, and that should be fine. And then we'll fly on down there and make sure they know what's going on. So we're going to get a little closer, because these aren't the longest range of missiles, so yeah. Again, these aren't fire and forget missiles, so we do have to hang around, but there's no hazards anymore. We gained air superiority like 2 episodes ago, and then last time took out all their air defenses, or at least exhausted them of their ammunition. And apparently they have no other missiles on Butte. That was all of them. They were horribly unprepared. Anyway, a little while later, we can see on the little screen on the right, the missiles fly in and destroy the target. Rather beautiful. Can't see it from this distance normally, but we have that screen that's quite nice for seeing it. Anyway, with that done, we can fly in over this beautiful little turquoise ocean and land somewhere. Not on this road. I always fly in like I'm going to land on this road and then remember, oh yeah, there's lampposts. We can't land on this road. So yeah, we're going to fly on over and land behind it in the desert. Luckily this has really big wheels, and I'm a pretty great pilot, so it shouldn't be too hard to land. It is a big plane though, so we're going to take it rather slow. But yeah, it's a fairly deserty planet actually. It's just desert and nice ocean. My kind of place. Very blue sky as well. This is quite a beautiful planet. Anyway, we touched down fine, a little far away from the base, so we have to turn around and drive back. Because, well, I take my time on landing, because I really didn't want to wreck the bomber, because that'd be depressing. And then we come in firing. We're just firing at the already destroyed thing. Don't really need to do this. We're just making sure that the people still inside the building know that we mean business. You know, we can't have them coming out and shooting at us, so we're just going to open fire a bit, make sure they know if they come out those doors, they're getting ripped apart with 20mm. So after we've murdered, liberated all of those people, we bring in the colony ships, just a couple to set up a couple of mining installations on Butte, so that we get a couple more points. Now we're up to 14 points a turn, which is pretty nice, which is, 14 points at the start and end of the term, which is a lot of points. I think there might be a 3rd slot on Butte, I'll have to check, and if there is, I'll put a defense installation, but for now, we're just going to stick with mining things, because we need more. We need more ships. Anyway, after that, the UFN Hercules heads back to Nebos. Looks pretty similar, but it has the rings, so you can tell the difference between Butte and Nebos. And we're going to get some more stuff for this, because last time around Jool, if you remember, I know it's been a while, we actually lost our skiff. So we're sending up a new one, just because this is heading out to Jool now to link up with the main fleet so that we can get to taking Jool in the next few turns, because it's very well defended. So now I'm just picking up an extra skiff. This is basically the same as the old one, except now this has medium armor, which makes it very hard to destroy, which makes it great for getting really close and doing a lot of damage. And I'm trying out something new as well. We've replaced the 20mm machine guns with a anti-ship laser mounted in the nose. It looks pretty silly from some angles, but from other angles it looks quite good. But anyway, yeah, we're going to try this out. An armored skiff with an anti-ship laser might be a very deadly weapon, and might be a big part of my war fighting in the future. So yeah, we get this all docked in. I've gotten pretty good at this, because despite having lots of like tools to like move ships quickly, I still have to do quite a lot of docking inside the carrier to actually move my ships around. So yeah, and yeah, goes pretty nicely. From this angle, yeah, the laser looks a bit junky, but from above, it looks okay. Anyway, that was the end of one turn, and we've combined 2 turns into this episode, because not that much happened in the last turn, and the same for Penguin. So now, we're at the next turn, and we have some terrible news from Moho. In between these turns, our frigate that we sent down to defend Moho from that mysterious ship has been destroyed. We have no idea. We assume it's the same ship that destroyed our corvette. But, yeah, it appeared to come out of nowhere, fire a bunch of missiles, and our frigate, for some reason, was poorly equipped to defend against missiles, because apparently it was carrying anti-ship lasers, not point defense lasers, which, while more powerful, do have to stop occasionally to cool down. So, we have a problem. We have a hostile force in this solar system, and we need to root it out and find it, and apparently one frigate isn't enough, so we're going to have to start building a home fleet this turn, and in the next few turns as well. But we'll get onto that a little bit later. But that is the latest news. That hasn't quite reached the outer solar system yet, which is where the UFN Hercules is heading. Now it's leaving Nebos after doing its job at Butte, and it's going to head out to Jool to go and link up with the rest of the fleet and continue to take the Jool system. So here we are arriving right at Tylo, because, well, we need to take Tylo, and it is the next planet in that has defenses on it. No orbital defenses, luckily. There is a big fleet around Lathe, too big for us right now, so we're going to have to take a little while before we engage that. But for now, we can keep taking out ground forces until we get down to Lathe. Now, Tylo is obviously quite a big world, so it's relatively hard to land on, but we've got some pretty futuristic tech here. I mean, current day tech, because we're in the... This is now. Anyway, so yeah, we're dispatching one of our Ostrich Mark IIs from the UFN Hercules. This is loaded up with our standard pair of tanks, which I'm very fond of still. They seem to be working quite well, and hopefully they'll work today. This is quite well defended. But we do have both our carriers out here now. I would have attacked last turn, but we only had the UFN Titan out here, so we wouldn't have had enough force to take Tylo. So yeah, landing on Tylo is difficult even with this kind of very powerful technology. So we're using both the VTOL and the VTOL and main engines, the main engines to slow down, and the VTOL engine just to keep ourselves from falling too much as we do slow down. And then you can just back up onto Tylo. And the way I'm going to do this is go almost the whole way down with the 2 engines so that I have more thrust-to-weight ratio, and then flip forward and land on the VTOL engine when I'm going slow enough, so that we have an easier time going down and then a gentler time landing. Because you don't really want to land on your engines. It's not... I mean, it's fine because it's KSP, but it's not great because this is a very heavy craft, and... it also has some very heavy tanks in it. I am actually developing a proper drop pod for this kind of operation. Like, massive airless worlds aren't great for this kind of vehicle, but a drop pod tends to be smaller. So maybe I could put 2 in the carrier. I'm not sure what the rules say about that. But anyway, also... yeah, I'm developing some other stuff. But for now, this does the job fine. You can see we flip forward to start slowing down after we've... to start landing vertically after we've burned off most of our velocity. I slightly overcooked this, though, and we're going down a little bit too fast, so I have to pull some... I mean, I'd say amazing, but most people would probably say stupid maneuvers to stop myself crashing into the ground, because... yeah, it's a pretty tough craft, but probably not tough enough to hit the ground at 100 meters per second. So what we do is we flip forward, fire up the engines, and just avoid for long enough to put ourselves down somewhere on the ground. And yeah, this seems to work fine. And then we flip back forward onto the VTOL engine and everything's alright. This is a very good craft, actually. It's heavy and kind of there's a lot of parts, so it's quite laggy. But it is quite a... I don't want to say maneuverable, but it's a pretty maneuverable craft with all the RCS thrusters. So I'm kind of liking this right now. I really do like this aircraft. I might keep it for a while. Until I don't really need to upgrade it. It doesn't do any actual fighting, so it's fine until we have bigger tanks maybe, or lots of smaller tanks. Maybe some swarm tactics might be in order. Anyway, once we get this all under control, we move in and land on Tylo. This is probably the longest landing scene you'll see in Kerbal Rising, because this is actually quite a difficult and interesting thing to do. But anyway, yes, we do eventually touch down. And there we go, nice and gentle, rock a little bit, but we're okay, and the the high gravity of Tylo means that we just kind of stay where we are pretty much. Roll a little bit, we just fire up the engines and counter that. And of course we bring in these, the second Ostrich Mark II from the UFN Titan. This just comes in a little later, a little after, and actually has a slightly nicer descent. We don't have to do any crazy mad shit. I do get a little confused with my action groups though and touch down a little hard, and then almost flip the aircraft. Okay, the landing was much worse than the previous one. It just was worse later. But the craft does survive. It is a tough craft, so yeah, that's good. Anyway, both of them down now with maximum peril, but with them down we can get the tanks out and start moving over towards our enemies. Of course, just our standard setup, the one with the, I think, 105mm gun and the one with the 57mm gun, basically heavy firing and fast firing, and they're a good combination because the big gun also fires quite quickly as well, so it's pretty good. And we have the exact same in the other Ostrich. Here we are, just getting them out, and they'll move over together. We have landed quite far away, so we're going to have a bit of a long drive and totally not a big, long vessel mover. Yeah, because it's hard to pick your landing site when you don't know the kind of world you're landing on. I haven't landed on Tylo in a very long time. Anyway, yeah, so here we are, going over. We've entered the crater where these guys are now. I thought it would be a much longer engagement, but as usually happens, the hills make it such that we get really close to our enemy before we are actually going to engage them. So this gives us the advantage. Now, annoyingly, one of the craft does explode. I tried this a bunch of times and it just kept exploding. I think it's because it's on the like on a launch pad, so it gets confused about where it really is. Anyway, that doesn't matter too much. We crest the ridge, we start opening fire. The big guns, I leave them on the ridge as kind of snipers, and then I move in the smaller guns to be fast firing and just try and get a lot of shots, maybe through panels of armor, just try and do maximum damage and just kind of scare them. We start taking fire from what looks like maybe like a 30mm cannon. I think it's one of the ones on the... There's some tanks down here with like 155mm guns and 30mm like goalkeepers. I think that might be what all that gunfire is. But there are some serious guns down here. I think there's like a 155mm like ship cannon that looks like a railgun but isn't. But despite that, we start doing damage really quickly without taking much ourselves. The big rounds, the 105s coming in from the ones on the hills, are just doing huge amounts of damage. The smaller guns aren't close enough to actually start firing now. Yeah, you can see what I'm talking about. That looks like one of the rail guns. And this is the other tank with, I think, like a chieftain turret, 155mm super velocity. Pretty deadly, but fires extremely slowly. And the kind of railgun looking thing actually keeps shooting low. You can just see it keeps shooting low, and it does this like the whole time. It hardly gets any shots on target. I think it's because it's made for shooting ships. So maybe that's why it's not doing so well. And you can just see these two tanks right there are just getting eviscerated. But not before our tanks jump at about 200 miles an hour and do this mad slipping, sliding maneuver while getting shot. I mean, I wish I'd had America Fuck Yeah blaring right there, because they like power slide at like 150 miles an hour, take a round to the face and keep going and shooting. It's like, that's American as fuck. I mean, that's Nebian as fuck? Yeah, Nebian sounds like a really weird word, but because we're from Nebos, I guess it's Nebian? I don't really like that word. Something's just off about it for me. Like, Nebian. Oh god, that's like skeeves me out. I don't know what it is. Anyway. Anyway, the battle rages despite my being skeeved out by the name of my race. And this light tank's moving in, firing at a hill because the tank's behind the hill. And then it takes a 155mm round to the side, which just separates the armor panels and the gun. So I think I found a design flaw in this tank, given that one shot just took it out. Now, it was a super velocity 155mm round against medium armor, so that's probably why. But still, that like just cut the whole tank apart. And then the same thing happens to this one. There's clearly just some piece inside this tank that just gets destroyed. I think that round actually was from like the railgun looking gun. And then the second one comes in and destroys it. So clearly that weapon isn't totally ineffective, but it's not great. Anyway, that's both our light tanks down. Despite us doing a lot of damage to these tanks, as you can see, they're both still alive. So they still have, I think, like 4 tanks alive, and that one that like fell through the runway or something. But they are taking a lot of fire, so I think we should be okay. And our tanks on the hills have taken no damage, so I think, yeah, it should be okay. But it pretty much devolves into a giant slugging match, just firing rounds, and most of the big rounds from them go low, and the chieftain turret doesn't fire frequently enough to be that good. So we don't have too much trouble with it, actually, and we basically destroy all of the tanks, these two tanks, pretty quickly. This one's had its gun cut off, and eventually will just die. And then the same goes for this one as well. This one's under the runway still. I just delete that at some point because it's getting annoying. But yeah, so we basically just destroyed the two main tanks down there. We've got a light tank which has actually had its gun destroyed, and then one extra heavy tank. So pretty much, once this one gets destroyed, it'll be one tank left to fight, and that's tucked away behind a hill, which is actually to our advantage because we can get nice and close. So yeah, this goes pretty well. I thought I was going to lose because they had more tanks than me and they had really big guns, but they didn't have enough like fast-firing guns. I do actually take a round from the other chieftain tank down there. What's it called? I think like the Harbinger or I don't know. Anyway, it's called something and it shot me. But it's tucked away behind a hill, so it can't do too much damage. Anyway, so with this tank, we just close in and get two shots at the same time and destroy that tank over there totally so that our guard mode won't be confused. And now we can head round and deal with the shell of the light tank back there, and then also, and then kind of pincer the the big tank, the heavy tank over here. So I'm going to send this Manta Ray Mark II over there to go and deal with it and distract it, while I send the other one around the back of these buildings to shoot up the remains of the light tank. However, it did just run into the remains of this tank, and I see how big this tank is now that I've run into it. It's gigantic. Anyway, apparently I destroyed a bunch more of its pieces just by ramming into it, because these tanks are strong. You know, they're made of not stalinium, freedominium. They're made of freedominium. Anyway, we close in on this shell. We want to destroy it so it doesn't distract our guard mode, but it's pretty risky because now the heavy tank can see us and can start shooting us. Luckily for a while it doesn't, but when I get too close to this shell, gun depression causes depression and I can't like get my gun low enough, so I have to back off and start shooting. But then the heavy tank starts shooting at me and I don't really want to focus on the basically dead tank now, because eventually it actually does get a hit, and that's scary because that's a 155mm railgun. Luckily it hits us in like the front slanted armor, so we're okay. I said railgun, I didn't mean railgun, just 155mm gun. If it was a railgun, we'd be dead, like Jesus Christ. Anyway, so the tank that was going around the front of the buildings moves in now, and we start opening fire, put a round into it, don't really do too much damage, but pretty soon we start doing some pretty serious damage. We slide around right into its wheels and, well, into its tracks, and now it's pitched up a little bit, and we just keep putting down fire. I don't think it's particularly heavily armored, but we are basically point-blank range with a 105mm gun, so, you know, there's not much surviving that. It's, pretty ridiculous. So anyway, now we're gonna just rush this tank forward. We're gonna forget about that dead tank. We'll just use manual shooting to stop guard mode getting confused. And you can see our tank is just laying round after round into it. These things fire quickly. These are some good guns. And the 155mm, like chieftain turret, which that one has, is extremely powerful, but it just fires so infrequently that it really can't defend itself, and it won't seem to use its 30mm goalkeeper, although I doubt that would be that much use really against medium armor. So anyway, we rush in and just start firing at it simultaneously, just hitting it as much as possible, and just the armor starts crumbling pretty quickly. You can see these explosions coming off it. It is just not made for this kind of punishment. Two like point-blank 105mm guns is a lot to deal with, even on a good day, and even with heavy armor. So yeah, it misses a shot because I guess we tipped it as it fired, and that was basically its last chance to defend itself. So we can pretty much just lay waste to it now. I really thought this would go worse. I thought it was going to have to attack Tylo again next turn, but apparently not. Which is good, because there's a lot more forces around Jool that we need to deal with. Mostly that fleet around late. That is gigantic and terrifying. We barely beat the last fleet, and that was much smaller. Anyway, we deal with that tank. The only remaining tank is just destroyed now. So we are good. Tylo is ours. The Jool system is quickly falling, being liberated by the United Federation of Nebos. Anyway, so, as I mentioned earlier in this turn, we had a pretty devastating hit. We have been laying waste to some, unorganized pirates and rogue nations, But we have not been dealing well with some clearly organized threat in the solar system. At Moho, we've had a lot of trouble. We've lost now a corvette and a frigate. That is a lot of ships to lose to a single enemy. And we think that it's coming from Scorch. This is our closest planet to Moho. We've seen a lot of weird signatures around it, you know, Kerbstein drive signatures, a lot of potential weapon discharges and explosions. So we're thinking this planet is the source of the evil in the solar system. We're thinking this planet may be the biggest threat to freedom and democracy in the solar system. We think that this planet may be the biggest threat to the United Federation of Nebos. So we are going to build ourselves a home fleet, and we are going to go to Scorch, and we are going to settle the score that we have to settle. Because they destroyed 2 of our ships, they've killed many of our crew, set back our defense program by a long way, but no more. Now that we have 15 points a turn, we've been saving up a little bit, and we have deployed 2 Cyclops Mark II frigates, the UFN Cicero and the UFN Claudius. These are both general-purpose frigates armed with what we now think, after all of our experience, is the best layout for a general-purpose frigate. 3 anti-missile point defense lasers, 1 55mm railgun, and 2 1.25mm torpedoes capable of taking out some really big ships. This is just the basis of the fleet. Next turn we will be deploying a carrier to supply this with smaller ships, and at some point they will probably get a destroyer with it as well. So these, for now, are just going to hang around Nebos, because this is actually at the end of our turn, the second turn of this episode, because we had to save up the points. So we can't go and actually defend Moho right now, but if anything were to happen between this turn and next, we could send these down and deal with them pretty swiftly. I mean, I'm feeling pretty good about these. They also have light armor, which makes them pretty resistant to weapons fire. So I think these should be a good basis for our fleet. They'll of course be supported, as I said, by a carrier, probably a different type of carrier to the ones we've been sending far out into the solar system. Those are good for exploration because they're general purpose, but we might build something a little more specific. But anyway, for all of this expanding 2 fleets now, we're going to need more points. So we're actually sending another colony ship to the Butte system to head down to Kibos and put down another mining installation, so that now at the start of every turn we'll get 15 points, and at the end of every turn we will get 15 points. For reference, those frigates just then cost about 17 points, so we could almost deploy 2 of them a turn. And actually, if we took off like the missiles, we could deploy 2 of them a turn. So it's pretty good. I'm feeling pretty good about our point level right now. We do need a few more defense installations around the place, but we'll figure that out. But yes, anyway, this is the end of the episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. As I said, it's 2 turns. That's also why we only found out about the frigate being destroyed halfway through the episode. Because, you know, it's in sync with Penguin's 2-turn episode. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope it was worth the wait. I know it's been a while, but as I've said many a time, I've been away training for my new job, but that's started and I'm all settled in, so I'm back to tube lording, back to being a tube lord. But anyway, like I said, I hope you've enjoyed this. This has been episode 8 of Kerbal Rising. I will see you next time.